we're diving over to the running back position now. Feels like this is probably the sexiest free agents pool, shall we say? Obviously, headlined with Saquon Barkley, fantastic break back, if that's a real word, bounce back season. Do you think that the Giants tag him? Do you think he could potentially hit free agency?
Yeah, I mean, this would be my understanding. Again, this is just sort of reading between the lines and trying to listen to what coaches have said and things. I think in an ideal world, they would love to run it back with Danny Dimes and Saquon, see what they can do in the draft, see if they can start building something there. But I think it's just all very much going to be price dependent and things like that, because obviously Saquon struggled for a couple years with injury. He knows he's a smart guy. He knows he has a short shelf life as a running back in the NFL, especially to be considered an elite running back. You look at guys like Dalvin Cook, Zeke, they haven't even been able to make it to the end of their big money second contracts before now they're being looked at as like, ooh, that was a mistake. That was disposable. So I think personally what makes the most sense for him is to try and get a contract. And if they don't want to give him a contract or they can't afford to give him a contract, it's not his decision whether he gets tagged or not. But I think that it seems to me like Daboll and that kind of coaching staff, they seem like good guys. Like, they seem like they're like, hey, look, we want you to do this. We want you to do that. We're willing to work with you. And if they can't come to some sort of agreement, I don't think they would stand in his way of going and looking elsewhere and trying to get something like that. But again, it just depends on how it works out. I think the smartest thing for him to do is to look around and see if he can get one of those Dalvin, Zeke, kind of contracts, maybe not quite a CMC contract, but something like that, because he's got a short shelf life, and if he did, heaven forbid, tears ACL again next year or something like that, what are the odds that he's ever going to really get a big, massive contract? So I think for him, it makes the most sense to try and make some money, but does it make the most sense for the Giants to give him like a 3 or 4 year deal?
Yeah. I think for me, Saquon's now in the point where I'm actively trying to sell Saquon. And I think that, people will go, oh, but do you not like winning? For me, anytime a running back hits this point in their career, as soon as they're hitting their second contract, I'm out. I'm looking to pivot to another running back plus picks. And, he's currently at RB4 in ADP, which, yeah, it's where I've got him ranked. But 26-year-old running back with the injury history that Saquon's had, yes, it was an incredible season, but I think that this is probably his last peak value. And I think that if I can pivot off him to, I don't know, let's say Ramondre Stevenson plus a good pick, can I get maybe J.K. Dobbins in a first or something like that? Those are the kind of moves that I'm looking to make, because I'm concerned that Saquon Barkley's dynasty value is, it might not drop in the next 6 months, it might not drop in the next year, but it is going to drop sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think as well, you make a really good point that I personally really emphasize in the off season. It's all about value for me. I don't care at all about roster construction in the offseason, especially this early in the offseason. Like, we've got 7-8 months before football's being played. Like, at this point, it's all just about X's and O's. It's about value. It's about like dollar signs, really, and to your point, Saquon's value at the moment has gone back up to a top 3, top 4 dynasty running back. Now, also another side note, we'll have another conversation. Maybe you'll come back on my show and we'll have a long conversation about the dynasty landscape for running backs at the minute is a mess. Like, honestly, there's about 3 running backs in the top 10 that I'm like genuinely excited to have on my team. And the rest of them, I'm like, do I really want this guy on my team? Do I really want like Joe Mixon on my team? Do I really want Dalvin Cook? Do I really want all these guys on my, Derrick Henry's? Do I want those guys on my dynasty teams? It's really genuinely a mess at the minute. And so RBs in general, I don't really like investing in, especially in the offseason. So yeah, if I can sell high on Saquon, if I can sell high on Miles Sanders, which is going to be harder to do, Tony Pollard, any of these guys, I'm happy to do so, because I think that this draft class that's coming in, I know we're not talking rookies today, I don't think that there's a whole boatload of Saquon Barkleys in this draft class, but I think there's a lot of decent to very good running backs in this draft class. And I think that this landscape in the NFL is shifting anyways, where there's very few bell cow roles anymore anyways. So you're going to just, you're really going to be stuck if you're really hanging your hat on having a Saquon Barkley or a, Derrick Henry or whatever. So I agree with you. I would certainly be looking to shop Saquon and see if I can get max value for him right now, because if something happens, like he goes somewhere where they already have a running back and they're just like, because they want to have a nice tandem, you know what I mean? Or say they keep him and then for whatever reason they sign a Leonard Fournette or something, you know what I mean? Something happens, that's going to just knock his value massively because people are going to get worried. Or again, heaven forbid he gets injured in the offseason or he gets injured in game one, then you're going to be stuck with a 26, 27-year-old running back who's on a second contract, who's deteriorating value. So yeah, absolutely. If you love your running backs, see if you can flip him for, one of those other guys plus, and then just stock up on some wide receivers and some quarterbacks.
Yeah, I completely agree. Any other free agent running backs that you're particularly intrigued, you think could be interesting this offseason?
Not really. I mean, like I said, for me, it's all about value in the offseason. And honestly, as far as running backs go, like there's very few running backs I go out and pursue in the offseason. Like I just don't like investing a lot of draft capital and stuff in running backs anyways for Dynasty, but especially not in the offseason because so much changes, every year so much changes. There's always, something like a Cam Akers or a J.K. Dobbins gets injured in the offseason and that just smashes their value and it ruins your, if you've gone out and traded 2 firsts for J.K. Dobbins and then you've been really crying, for the last year or two. So I think for me, no, I think that it could be interesting to see what this whole injury situation does to Tony Pollard's value, because I think a lot of people were super excited about him hitting the free agency market, see what he could become. But there's not anybody really that I'm going out of my way to try and really trade for urgently, other than like Breece Hall.
Yeah, no, I love that one. I think for me, I think the Tony Pollard one is interesting just because I wonder if the injury potentially means that he could be back in Dallas on a 1-year prove-it deal. I don't know if. I hope that another team is willing to pay him a decent contract because I want all running backs to get paid because I feel like it's such a brutal position. But I do wonder if teams are going to say, oh, he's injured, don't know, let's not give him a long-term deal. And therefore he's back in Dallas on a 1-year, $7-8 million deal.
Yeah. And honestly,
and to
man,
me, that's the best thing for his value.
And honestly, I'm serious. Like, and I know this is not gospel. It's not a perfect thing or anything, but I was messing around just for fun the other day on the PFF, mock draft simulator and looking at like different options for Vikings or the Bears or whatever, just curious about some things. And like, and again, this is not gospel. It's not exactly, but like you were getting guys like Eric Gray and Tajay Sharp and like these guys in like the 4th, 5th round, you know what I mean? Like, and that's like, those guys are pretty good running backs. You know what I mean? I don't think there's not a lot of need. I think most teams are looking around being like, man, that really sucks that they paid Zeke. Man, that really sucks that they paid Dalvin. That really sucks that they paid Mixon. Those guys are real casualties. They're really slowing them down now. Why did they get just as much production out of Ramondre Stevenson, a 4th round pick, as they got out of like, Damian Harris? Why did they get just as much or better production, out of whoever, like Samaje Perine as they did Joe Mixon? You know what I mean? And I think that the kind of the penny is dropping, for lack of a better term, where I don't know how many more of these really big, massive contracts they're going to keep handing out because it doesn't seem to play out for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like you'd be better off playing your rookie contract, franchise tag, and then you can probably let them go, which is a really grim proposition for such an exciting position, particularly for fantasy. Looking over to an unsexy position, I think, in free agency, wide receivers. We've got these 4 on the screen. There's also Juju Smith-Schuster. Is there anyone that you're particularly excited about that could hit the open market?
Not really, man. Like Jacoby Myers, I suppose, really, he's probably the obvious one. And even I think that I feel like it's weird. He's a weird case study because he is a value. I get it. He is a value in startups. He is a value in redraft every year. But at the same time, there's like the hive of Jacoby Myers truthers that act like he's, this incredible, just amazing value that you're just so happy you have. And like, I don't know, like he's good, but not great. I think he's he's overperformed what we all expected. What was he, an undrafted? Wasn't he undrafted? Yeah. A UDFA. So he's certainly overperformed what was expected of him. He's had a really nice career. I think he'll get a solid payday because of look how crap the agent market is. But I don't know that he's ever going to be like I don't think he's ever going to be your wide receiver one. I don't even think he's necessarily going to be your wide receiver two, like that you're going to feel comfortable and confident rolling out as your wide receiver two. I think if you have him as like a nice flex play, that's a nice, that's a nice thing. And I am interested. I will say, I know it's been made fun of and everyone's kind of having a laugh about the Bill O'Brien signing in New England. I actually think that's a really good thing for New England. I mean, I think it's a real bump up because their offense was awful this year, like truly terrible. And I think they just set them up to fail because they didn't even have an offensive coordinator. They didn't have anybody who was even an offensive mind. And for all of his like faults and foibles, like Bill O'Brien has shown that he is a good offensive coordinator. He is a good guy to get offenses rolling in the right direction. I mean, the Texans really, I would say almost overachieved every year when he was their head coach. So with him coming into town, if they re-sign Jacoby Myers, I do think that's actually a really good thing for his value for him and Mac Jones. But yeah, I think just price dependent. Like, he's not somebody that I'm like, you must get Jacoby Myers at all costs, but he is somebody that like, if you're in a league where maybe they're not the most savvy and they're not really paying attention to things like that, maybe they're just thinking about rookies and you can get Jacoby Myers for like a second or something like that, a mid to late second, that'd be sweet. Like, that'd be nice. That'd be a nice little addition, to your team, but I'm not going to like pay a first for him.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think before the Mac Jones injury, Jacoby Myers was top 12 in yards per route run. He was top 12 in targets per route run. He was top 12 in points per game. Like, before the Mac Jones injury, he was producing, and it kind of went under the radar. He had a bit of a, should we say a drifting finish to the season where he didn't kind of kick on. But as you said, this offense should take a kick forward. I think there's going to be some investment in terms of the skill position players. I think that Mac Jones has done enough to solidify himself as the starting quarterback for next year. And hopefully, as you said, Bill O'Brien coming in, this offense could take a step forward. I fully expect Jacoby Myers to be around. I think they're going to sign him. I was reading today the franchise tag is like $18.5 million for Jacoby Myers. I think there's no world in which they're franchise tagging him. I do expect them to sign, a 2-3 year contract, and hopefully he can get locked up for the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's definitely the one to go after there. I mean, to your point, I think even with the rough season that he had, if you look at all wide receivers last year with a minimum 50 targets, I'm pretty sure he was top 24 for PFF grade, for offense and for route running and things like that. So he is a solid wide receiver. And I do think, I personally think that Mac Jones goes into that like Jared Goff category that we were talking about, where he's a buy because everyone's like, yuck, Patriots offense, yuck. But honestly, Mac Jones was a top 12 PFF quarterback his rookie year. Like, he had a really solid rookie year when they had a decent offensive coordinator. And now that they've got a better offensive coordinator in, depending on how their offseason goes, I think he could be a sneaky buy low.
Yeah, no, I like that. Before we dive across to the final position of free agencies, if you aren't, make sure you're liking, subscribing, hit that big thumbs up button for us. It really helps out. The final position, Evan, an interesting class. We've got the free agent tight ends. We can see there Evan Ingram, Dalton Schultz, Robert Tonyan, Mike Gesicki.
Dog. Is
there anyone that you think could be a value? Anyone you think that perhaps is overvalued at the moment?
I think Evan Ingram is probably, a value still. He was an amazing value last offseason. Everyone was just done with Evan Ingram, sick, sore, and tired of him. Big disappointment in New York and stuff. And so if you were able to get him for like a third, which was definitely possible last offseason, then you certainly reap the rewards of it. So it depends. I mean, he had a really nice year, but I think sometimes in Dynasty, once we make up our minds about somebody, it's like really hard to convince us that we're wrong. So I think there's probably people that still have some take lock. You might still be able to get a deal on Evan Ingram. For me personally, I'm no interest whatsoever in Robert Tonyan. I mean, and even Mike Gesicki, like, I think he would need to go to the right landing. I think if he went to the right offense, the right, situation, I think he could be good, certainly good for fantasy. I think I certainly not somebody, again, we're not talking about it. I'm not going to get into it, but it's a really strong tight end class that's coming in this year in 2023. And so there's definitely a lot of other dudes that I'm more interested. I think of all those guys you've got on the screen there, Evan Ingram's probably the one that I'd be the most interested in, based on how good of a year he had there. I'd be interested to see what Jacksonville does, as far as like how, if they try and tie him down long term. He seems to have had a pretty good rapport there, and they're certainly on the up. Dalton Schultz, in my opinion, is just a guy. I'm quite happy trading out on Dalton Schultz if there are believers in your league. If somebody's excited about Dalton Schultz, now that they've gotten rid of Kellen Moore and the Cowboys offense just feels like it's really stagnated, it's really hit its plateau, and I don't believe in McCarthy personally as a head coach. I just think Dalton Schultz is just a guy. I don't think that he's this like dominant tight end. He's tight end landscape is gross in general. So if you can trade away Dalton Schultz, I'd be happy to do so if you can get a nice return on him.
Yeah, so for me, Robert Tonyan, no value. Don't want anything to do with him. I think Rodgers is going to be gone. I don't know where he's going to end up. I'm fine with that. Mike Gesicki, I think basically if he gets treated as a wide receiver in free agency and a team goes and says, we're going to line him up in the slot, we're going to treat him as a pure wide receiver, I'm probably really interested. I don't think that's going to happen, so I'm probably out. Evan Ingram, I think I agree with you. I think he's probably going to be back in Jacksonville. If he is, I'm quite interested in him and think it's a value. If he hits the the open market and he ends up going elsewhere, I'm probably less interested just because I don't like tight ends traditionally moving team, because I think it's such a team specific position in terms of how they're used that I don't think that you look at the history, there's not many that move teams and succeed. To that point, I think Dalton Schultz is maybe the most kind of Rorschach tests type player in Dynasty at the moment. I think that if you look at him, if he's back in Dallas, if he can be the number 2 target, I think he is a screaming value at his current price. If he moves in free agency, if Dallas goes out and spends high draft capital, free agent money to go and bring in a competent second receiver, Michael Gallup's another year back from the injury, and Dalton Schultz is either back in Dallas as like the 4th option or on another team, then yeah, I probably don't want any part of him. So I think he could be equally overpriced and undervalued in equal measure, depending on what happens over the next couple of months.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it just, again, like you say, it's literally league to league. It's not, he's the guys like Kelsey or even Andrews, like you're like, okay, wherever he is, whatever league you're in, they're going to be valued and they're going to be like, they're going to cost you a premium. But I think there's probably leagues, like you said, to your point, where Dalton Schultz is treated as like his top 3 tight end or something, whereas I'm not interested in that price. If somebody's just like, oh, whatever, the Cowboys suck and Dalton Schultz is a bum and they're treating him as like, tight end 16 or something, then yeah, absolutely. Like if you've punted tight end and you have no really strong options, then yeah, certainly go after him. But for me, yeah, it's just like, I don't see him as like this generational talent who like, oh my goodness, you need him on your team, that's going to push you over the top and make you a contender. Like, Jake Ferguson, he looked all right at times. He's got some potential going into like year 2. We know the tight end is a slow burner, takes some time. I just think that CeeDee Lamb's looked great this year. I think Gallup looked pretty terrible this year. Yes, he'll be another year further removed from the injury, but it'll be interesting to see how they attack it. If they do actually go after another decent wide receiver, that could just cut down on Dalton Schultz's opportunities. So yeah, very much I agree with you. Price dependent. If it is a low price, then yeah, go for it.